This is continuing coverage. The Black Swan murder trial of Ashley Benefield from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. Now back to the courtroom.
Juror was running late. My understanding is all the jurors are here and they've been brought up. And then obviously I've had computer problems this morning, so we'll just get going. Anything you need to bring up before we resume with the defendant's case in chief?
Judge, the clerk notified me on Friday that had not actually entered states 103 and 104, so I would like to go ahead and end those. I don't know if the defense has a case bottle. We did talk about that. I
just don't know what 104 is.
It's
I don't
the
either.
modeling picture and the mugshot.
Oh, actually, that's what I was going to say about that.
All right, so you're just going to save that until your rebuttal? Okay.
Yes, and then just to put on the court's...
There's the discovery issue, which those photographs have provided them.
Well, the mugshot.
All right.
Certainly.
So I'm making a note that we have to have a Richardson hearing on that issue then.
And also just to, for scheduling purposes, at some point, hopefully before, right at lunch, I would like to have a discussion about whether the court would allow the state to introduce evidence from Dr. Broder that we had previously talked about before. I just wanted to get a ruling from the court so I know whether to get him here or not.
Okay. I don't know what evidence it is, so I'll just wait for you to bring it up.
Okay.
Defense, any issues before we resume?
No, sir.
All right.
Ready.
State, you ready?
Yes.
All right. You said ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, just want to make sure. Are you feeling all right?
Yeah, picked up a little cold, but I'm good.
Same here, so I understand. Okay. All right, you all can have a seat. Welcome back, everybody. Good morning. I don't know who had car trouble, but I hope everything worked out. Had time to kind of calm down from that. So we're going to get started. As when we left on Friday, the state was presenting it. The defense was presenting its case. I do need to ask you, though, before we get started, just had a couple of days off. Did anybody discuss the case amongst yourselves in any way? Did anybody discuss the case with anyone outside of this jury? Did anyone do any research or watch any coverage at all about the people, places, things, or legal topics we've heard anything about? Everybody says no. Mr. Taylor, call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense called Bruce Ferris.
I do. Thank you. Morning, Judge.
Morning, sir. My name is Judge White. I'm going to be presiding over this case. Just have a seat. Make yourself comfortable in that chair. Get yourself about 12 to 15 inches from that microphone. It's pointed straight up, but it does adjust down, left, right, up, down, whatever you need. And if you just speak directly, the loud, clear voice into the microphone, it should pick up everything.
Okay, I will.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Will you tell us your full name and spell your last name, please?
Bruce Eric Ferris, last name Ferris.
Mr. Ferris, what type of work do you do?
I'm a licensed mental health counselor.
And how long have you held that position?
I've been doing that for 14 years. I've counseled individuals I just recently counted 1,000 clients, not including group work I've done. I also am a consultant in domestic violence and testify as an expert court witness in domestic violence.
Let's talk about your education for a minute.
Okay.
Please enlighten us.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering. I graduated from the Police Academy in Gainesville, Florida, and I have a master's degree in mental health counseling.
And do you have any specialized education or training in a specific field?
Yes. Been to a lot of training sets of seminars and certifications and various conferences. In my curriculum vitae, I'll call it a CV, my resume, there's about 100 items listed of trainings that I've been to over the years.
For what specific field?
In domestic violence and mental health and trauma to children and trauma in general, and I could go on, but that's the general focus of all my work.
Let's talk about your work experience for a moment.
Oh, okay.
Tell us about it.
So as a counselor now, my day is spent seeing individual clients. I specialize, like I mentioned, in domestic violence victimization, both men and women. I also see generalized mental health issues and typical things that a counselor would do, but I have a focus on domestic violence and family problems. I also counsel adolescent boys, most of which are going through the foster care system or adoption or divorce of their parents, etc.
All right, and what position prior to that?
I was a police officer in Gainesville, Florida for 20 years. I graduated the police academy in 1993, got sworn in 94. I retired in 2013. The last 10 years of that career, I was a detective, uniquely running, I was a lead detective of what's called the Domestic Violence Unit of the Investigations Bureau at the Gainesville Police Department. Over the course of that time when I retired, I looked back and did a little search, and I had arrested or filed charges or got warrants on 500 different abusers over those years.
First, give us an idea of your professional entry, lightly.
Sure. I'm licensed with the state of Florida, like I mentioned, as an LMHC or licensed mental health counselor. I have to keep up with education, et cetera, keep my license active. I'm certified as a Batters Intervention Program facilitator. In case anyone doesn't know it, Batters Intervention, which I'll refer to as BIP, is a 6-month class given to abusers who are found guilty or on probation or could be part of their injunction order. And it's a curriculum based upon the Duluth Power and Control Wheel, and it's a psychosexual type, not sexual. It's a type of therapy that involves some counseling and some ownership and learning. And also, I was a certified police officer, I mentioned. I also have certification as a domestic violence danger assessment and level of danger scoring system developed by Jackie Campbell out of Johns Hopkins University. And I also have a certification as adoption competency training, mental health for mental health professionals out of Rutgers University. I'll stop there.
And briefly, have you been in various boards?
Yeah, I have. Okay. The Alachua County Board of Commissioners had nominated me to Governor DeSantis to be part of the Children's Trust Fund of Alachua County. I received the 31st Annual Martha Varnes Award for Outstanding Achievement in Prevention of Domestic Violence Against Women. I had recognition for valuable contributions in what's called Crisis Intervention Team. I train officers how to de-escalate confrontations with citizens. I did receive the 2010 Distinguished Victim Service Award for recognition of outstanding contributions to crime victims for National Crime Victims Week by State Attorney General Pam Bondi awarded that to me, and Governor Scott at the time was there for the presentation. I'll stop there. There's a few more.
Have you been recognized as expert on violence for the state of Florida?
I have. So I've been involved in 60-some cases as either consultant or expert witness. 50 of those I've been recognized by the judiciary as an expert in domestic violence, mental health, batters intervention, effects of DV on children.
All right, and when say here for approximately 6 times as an expert witness, was it for any particular side in a dispute? That say, for example, a criminal case was always prosecution, always defense?
Both. I've worked for the state attorney's office and worked for defense, and a majority of my cases have been in civil court, though I have worked in criminal court also.
Would you, Mr. Harris, tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what another definition of domestic violence?
Well, so there's the criminal statutes of domestic violence, which are typically, we all know, is battery, ag battery, assault, ag assault, false imprisonment, sexual abuse, etc., person crimes involving a family or household member against each other. And that has another definition. That's spouses or family members living together, or it could be a couple that had a child together that have never lived together. It doesn't include, let's say, cousins who've never lived together and aren't intimate in any way. But through my experience, I've realized that there's a greater, that's umbrella, and that has to do with power and control. The abuser needs to control their victim. Now, they'll use the criminal things, hitting, etc., all those things, but in a greater sense, there's also this, I referenced it earlier, the Duluth Power and Control Wheel that DCF's accepted for the BIP class. I'd like to explain the Power and Control Wheel, if that's okay.
In fact, with court's permission, perhaps have the screen come down, lights dim. Mr. Ferris, you have a laser pointer in front of you. The little star in red will provide you with the
Okay.
dot.
Judge, may I stand here and pay attention to the mic as I talk?
Any objection?
Okay. So as I meant, there's the criminal definition.
Is there a
And
question, objection, was there a question?
Go ahead with the question.
Yes. What is it that's on the
Right,
screen?
so what
Mr. Ferris?
Okay, so-
Mr. Ferris?
Yes, sir.
Would you please tell us what is on the screen?
I will. So this is what's referred to as the Duluth Power and Control Wheel. And so there's physical violence and sexual violence. Those are the criminal things I talk about. And then there's these power and control aspects. And the nature of the power and control is repetitive. It's a way to get control. So up at, we'll call it 1 o'clock, using intimidation, making her afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying her property, abusing pets, and displaying weapons would be an aspect of intimidating your partner, again, to gain control. Using emotional abuse, putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, calling her names, making her think she's crazy, playing mind games, humiliating her, making her feel guilty. Then isolation, controlling what she does, who she sees and talks to, what she reads, where she goes, limiting her outside involvement, using jealousy to justify actions. Then a big one that I see often is minimizing, denying, and blaming, making light of the abuse, not taking her concern seriously, saying abuse didn't happen, shifting responsibility for the behavior, saying she caused it. Another one is using children, making her feel guilty about the children, using the children to relay messages, using visitation to harass her, threatening to take the children away, male privilege, treating her like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle, being the one to define men's and women's roles. Using economic abuse, preventing her from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money, giving her an allowance, making her ask for money, not letting her know or have access to family income. And the last one is coercion and threats, making her carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, threatening to leave her, saying that he'll commit suicide, reporting her to the government, making her drop charges, making her do illegal things.
Now, I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask you about that wheel that you demonstrated for us. Is this something that you created?
No, this was rated by, up in Duluth, Minnesota, there was a domestic violence advocacy group and also researchers. They looked at police reports, they interviewed victims of domestic violence who come through the shelter, and through a period of time they developed these 8 items and created the power and control wheel. This wheel is used around the country and actually internationally. Like I said, it's the base curriculum for the Battery Prevention Program class I talked about, and it's taught quite readily all across America by use by domestic violence shelter.
How long has this wheel, if you will, been in existence?
Yeah, probably, I'm guessing 30 years or so, could be a little more.
Are there any agencies within the state of Florida that predicate their decisions upon the Duluth Power Wheel?
Yeah, the DCF accepted the power and control wheel for the curriculum for the BIP class.
That's the Florida Department of Children's and
Families, they were the ones who were controlling the BIP class when it started up. Also, a lot of federal money, domestic violence against women act, things like that have always promoted the power and control wheel, and also, given out grants and education money.
Are the majority of abusers male or female?
Majority are male, but there's certainly a percentage that are female. I'd say it's at least 2/3 male at the least. And in my practice, I have male victims.
And what about on the other end, the victims of domestic violence? What's the percentage of males and females?
So again, there's some different statistics. Somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 are men, and
are men as victims of domestic violence?
2/3 to 3/4 abusers. So that on the other side of that, they're 1/3 to 25% male victims. And I just got a male victim this past week.
Okay,
okay, I'm done.
I want to make sure we're clear on this.
Sure.
You've told us that the percentage of abusers that are male is approximately 2/3. Is that correct?
At least 2/3. There's some statistics to make it actually higher.
Would you tell us, please, what percentage of domestic violence victims are female?
Somewhere between 2/3 to 3/4.
All right. Now, I want to ask you if you would educate us, Mr. Ferris, about whether or not there are common characteristics that abusers share.
And I certainly can do that, Mr. Teller. Can I make one closing statement about the Duluth wheel? And
Sure.
Power and control. So I think it needs to be said, and maybe I didn't say it, that the whole idea of the use of the wheel is to get compliance by the abuser with their victim. So they're looking to control them, and either they use those criminal, the battery, or they use emotional abuse or intimidation, or use different techniques to try to control them. So the victim of domestic violence is placed with wanting to have the least harm to them. So they get into a compliance, I call it an equilibrium type of status mode, where they seek to get along, to go along. They don't want to poke the bear. They don't want. They believe that this is certainly a danger to be involved with this person, their mate, their spouse, etc. So they comply, and they get in this compliance mode, and they can certainly appear to society as nothing's going on, but there actually is, and they're afraid to display that because of the retribution that might happen.
All right,
I'll go
so
on to-
this wheel then is the product, if you will, of the science of domestic violence over the past 30
Right.
years.
And throughout my entire practice, the thousands of people that I've counseled and even the 500 I've arrested, I see this repetitively true.
All right, now, would you please tell us,
Oh, I do. Thank you.
I need you to make sure you keep your voice up so that
Yes,
others
sir.
can hear you. Would you now tell us, Mr. Ferris, whether or not there are common characteristics that abusers share?
They can be anyone from all socio-economic stratas, and that's been my experience also. And I said, like I said earlier, predominance men, but also females.
What's motivation, their behavior?
They want to control their partners. I find often an ownership type attitude. They want to control them.
How do they treat general pets?
Pets. So statistics have shown that abusers abuse pets well above average, more than average citizens would. And so I have two theories about that. One is that they're missing some empathy, or they tend to see things as objects. And so, okay. Can I explain why they abuse pets?
Yeah.
So if a pet is belonged to the female or their partner, the victim.
Can you approach?
First, describe what term worse role that's violence.
Sure. So coercive control, acts of aggression, assault, threats and harm, punish, frighten the victim. And that fits in with creating fear, and it fits in with this whole continuum of power and control, a pattern that is developed to control the victim.
Do offenders always behave violently, or does behavior act psychotic?
They don't always act violently in what common term of a battery or an assault. It can be accomplished just by threats and fear. And in terms of a cycle, there can be a violent or emotionally abusive state, and then a honeymoon side of state. Then it cycles back. In the field, we talk of a model of kind of like rain and sunshine. And,
All right, let me ask her, does the victim always be afraid, or act like they are afraid?
Definitely not. Oftentimes, the motivation is to hide the abuse from friends, family, law. There's lots of repercussions if it's disclosed. One could be fear that the oppressor, the abuser, the husband, the boyfriend, the wife, whoever is the abuser, will harm them. So they're very scared. The other is they might not even understand that they're victims of domestic violence. Quite often, when I get clients, people don't know those definitions.
How common is Ferris for a victim of domestic violence smile and act happy?
Very much so, and also in terms of even in public or with family.
Why?
Because they're afraid. They found this least resistance. They're trying to not poke the bear, as we'll say, or we've all heard the term walking on eggshells. They're trying to avoid aggression by their partner because they've grown to believe that there's a threat here.
Would that characterize that as a appeasement?
Totally appeasement. It's something I see quite often. And if
What
I'm
is the victim trying to by gauge his behavior?
not encourage him to be abusive to herself, or if there's children involved, she's putting up a front to again create a type of stasis or minimum amount of aggression, so they don't want to again poke the bear. They're afraid of the repercussions.
All right, some insight. Does introduction of a child change the dynamics?
Yes.
Tell us how and why.
Okay, so it definitely ups the ante, we'll speak.
Objection. I have objection.
I'll overrule on this.
So yes, definitely, if someone is single and they're being abused, certainly they want to incur least amount of abuse. But when a child's involved, now they're concerned, and if they have a strong maternal instinct, now they're concerned about their own safety and their child's safety. And abusers will use a child as a manipulation tool to try to get at the victim. So the victim, that's even a further degree of way to pacify. Oftentimes women will stay in marriages because they want to protect the child, even though it's detrimental to themselves.
A couple of questions about abuse, if I may. How do they generally rate on a scale of ability, charm, deceive us?
Quite highly. Those 8 years I taught domestic violence crimes, I got to know quite a few, and some were individual therapy clients also. Many of them, I used to say, have the gift of the gab. They were very personable, friendly. Not all of them, but a large percent definitely were very much the charmer. They'll hide the abuse, and they use it as a strategy to influence or control their victims.
Is there a pattern? Excuse me. Is there a pattern, Mr. Ferris, of denying, rationalizing, minimizing, or blaming these relationships?
I can say a very high percentage, well, I don't know, over 90% I'd estimate of all my cases involve minimizing, denying, blaming. In fact, on the power and control wheel, I guess it's gone, it's one of the 8 categories is minimizing, denying, and blaming. And it's all a technique. She made me hit her. I didn't really do it. It wasn't that bad. They're always trying to minimize and talk their way out of their being abusive.
Would you explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Ferris, is there a particular time in these relationships when violence is most likely against the victim?
Yes, very much. The most dangerous time statistically is when a woman or a victim of domestic violence is leaving their abuser, and if the abuser's there. There's a high fatality rate, high incident of danger to them. I've been trained in this in my evaluation with John Hopkins' work. This is a really dangerous time. As advocates for domestic violence, we oftentimes have safety plans. Those plans, part of those plans, you never leave.
All right, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Ferris, if I may, a couple of hypothetical questions.
Certainly.
Involving a hypothetical abuser and a hypothetical victim. First, I'd like you to tell me, the following acts be consistent with an abuse, and allow me to finish your opinion.
I'm gonna.
You want to approach?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Ferris, I'm going to give you a series of hypotheticals, and I'd like you to tell us if it's consistent with
Yes, sir.
shooting a gun in the kitchen of a home in an effort to intimidate the victim, stop speaking, throwing the loaded gun at the victim, cruelty to pets, punching a dog in the face hard enough to knock the dog unconscious, throwing a cat down the steps, placing a tracker on the victim's car, a little tracker, throwing things, breaking things, yelling, screaming, belittling, cursing, humiliating, declaring such statements as rid the earth, being in a murderous mood, kill all the bad people, take them out, being caught at night, peering into windows of the victim's home, violating a no-contact order by sending a package, driving from South Carolina to Florida to be able to follow the victim, suicidal threats if the victim leaves, more than 30 years age difference, and finally, prior marital history whereby the prior wife explains how she was beat up on the honeymoon. Would that be consistent with abuse?
Absolutely. And not only absolutely, but those are checklist points right off the Duluth Power and Control Wheel and right off my experience. They're stereotypical abuse techniques.
All right, and now my last question for you, Mr. Ferris, is I'm going to give you a hypothetical. Tell me if this would be consistent with someone who suffers from it. Sending texts that are conciliatory with friendly emojis, accompanying the abuser during child time sharing ventures, acting deferential and subservient in joint therapy sessions, but decisively different in individual sessions, fearful of the abuser finding out the victim described him as controlling, manipulative, and abusive, and being exposed to threats, intimidation, pushing, holding down, humiliating, cursing, saying that be consistent with a victim of SI.
Without a doubt, these are again techniques of compliance, not wanting to poke the bear, walking on eggshells, trying to minimize harm to themselves and their children. They'll put up a front. They don't want anyone to know, and they don't want their abuser to be angry by them disclosing. So yes.
Lastly, one other factor I'd like to mention, with a video of the abuser and the abused at a restaurant with a child and another adult, whereby they are all act happy, be consistent.
Well, certainly, if you're asking, they're acting happy, is she still a victim of domestic violence? Definitely, and it also fits with this whole idea of appeasement. We have to remember that the domestic violence comes in layers through the years of events. So one incident.
Judge, I'm going to object.
So that behavior isn't just a spot image right then. What's going on inside her? Why is she acting that way? That's what I would ask clients. That's what we're looking for. And if it's truly a victim of domestic violence, she'll be in this appeasement mode to try to please him and not disclose the abuse to get along sort of description.
My final question, as relates in general to SI, assume hypothetically there were several violent acts in SI, and then there was a break, chain of events, or let's say much or two. And then it started up again. Does the victim remember, and is the victim affected by earlier acts?
Without a doubt. I've got clients who tell me about.
Yeah, just
So yes, definitely they don't forget the abuse that's occurred to them, trauma lasting. Adults remember childhood trauma, let alone something from several years ago. Like I say, layers of impacts of behavior.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
State cross.
Good morning, Mr. Ferris.
Good morning.
Mr. I want to ask you give you some examples and ask you if this is consistent with a victim mentality.
Sure.
Minimizing the abuse.
Now you're asking me if the victim would minimize?
Yeah, like what I mean by that, and maybe I said it wrong, is like covering or taking blame for the abuse, covering for the abuser, taking blame.
Yes.
Making excuses for him.
Definitely.
Or her, I guess. Not reporting the abuse.
Right.
Dropping charges if they were filed.
Yep.
Not standing up for themselves.
Yes.
And not leaving.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put that wheel back up, and I want to talk to you about the high section each.
Sure.
Okay. While she's fixing it, and I know you're familiar, and do you have a copy in front
I
of
do.
you?
I
do
want-
too.
I want
do
right
too.
in front of me.
Okay. And so I want to talk first about the use of intimidation. Would you agree that if somebody, this says making her afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying things, her property. We talked about a break. If those things weren't occurring for years, would you, but had allegedly occurred prior to that, would you still consider that part of this dynamic?
Yes.
If it's been a distance in time?
Yeah, I think the distance can be totally irrelevant.
And there's a section on here about the economic abuse. Would you find that if a hypothetical victim was living on her own for several years, had no monetary dependence on the alleged abuser, and lived in her own home in another state for part of that, and there was no monetary connection, that would not apply that to a relationship?
Could you restate the question?
So if in this wheel,
Right.
hypothetically, and I'm talking just about economic,
Right.
would you say it still applies if the victim was living on her own for several years with family and independently sufficient economically, no financial dependence on the other person? Would you agree with me that economic would not apply to that?
From the scenario you give me, it doesn't sound like it would apply.
Okay. And for isolation, would you agree that if on the same fact, living on her own for several years with family, so I know it says like, living on her own with family and having some periods of no contact over a year, and back in contact, living and having her own cell phone, her own car, her own home. Do you agree with me that that's not?
Well, you have to remember, under the isolation also comes jealousy and justifying actions. So in terms of isolating, not letting their partner or the victim go to work or see family, in that sense, what you're saying is true. But a component of isolation could also be extreme jealousy, possession, your mind, those sort of things.
And I didn't add those facts. You're adding those facts, right?
Well, under the power and control world, the last item, I don't know if you actually mentioned it, using jealousy to justify actions.
And if that was not a fact, that's not a fact. in my scenario.
Then isolation component may not be part of that, component for the scenario we're looking at, the couple we're looking at.
And why do you say may not? What part of that that would apply.
Well, would not be.
Okay. Using the children. If the hypothetical victim had custody of the child and attempted to terminate parental rights, and the hypothetical abuser had to seek court intervention to get the child,
Right.
would that be a factor in your consideration of whether children were being used? If she had sole control of a child.
So you're asking me if I could just reframe that. The alleged abuser is not he's not using child against their alleged victim, then they're not necessarily guilty of using the children.
I'm not asking if it's guilty. I'm just asking if that would apply. We've talked about how these
Right.
things apply.
It may not apply. It would not apply. But I think if I could mention, you're missing the point of the power control wheel. This is about pattern of behavior.
I'm not missing
Okay.
it. I'm just asking hypothetical
Okay.
questions. How about the using a male privilege? If that hypothetical abuser was not having any control over her big decisions or did not live with her, so was not being the master of the castle, was not treating her like a servant because they lived separately, and was not defining their roles, in fact, was offering to purchase things, get her anything she needed, those kind of things. Would you agree with me if those were the facts of a relationship, male privilege would not apply?
No, I wouldn't agree with you.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, the men's roles, and when you say purchasing things, I would want to look into what is that a concept of what the role is. I'm the man, I purchase things, I control things for you, I decide what to get, etc. So that could be a male privilege issue.
Okay, and I understand that, and that we're factor. I think it kind of goes again, what I should have asked. She's asked, something else. Yes, for it. That's not him telling her.
So in terms of him buying things for her that she's asking for, I wouldn't consider that to be domestic violence.
You would not.
No.
And so that's, other than that caveat, then male privilege wouldn't necessarily apply to the cycle that we're in, under my facts.
The facts are not complete enough for me to come to the conclusion.
How about minimizing, denying, and blaming? What, you said that was present in 90% of the cases.
Quite a bit, yes.
Right, I think you said 90.
I did.
What if the hypothetical abuser says, I was wrong, I lost all, none of them, never said your fault? Do you then feel like that's not my
No, I wouldn't agree with that, because it could be that part of the strategy of minimizing could be that, I'm sorry I did do it. That could just be minimizing.
I'm sorry not I did it. Sorry I did it.
Right.
That's part of
That's still-
minimizing?
yes.
Well, certainly not denying or blaming, right?
I would need more definitive
I
facts.
guess I need an explanation. If somebody takes responsibility for actions against them,
Right.
how that is minimizing. To say, yes, you are correct, and I am sorry.
It could be a way to dialogue or to minimize what occurred by accepting blame for it, and that could be part of their scenario.
Could it also be the opposite?
Yes,
That person
it could
is
be.
taking credit, is taking responsibility for their actions.
Right, certainly it doesn't deny that it happened, that's for sure.
Right, and no blame being set forward if they say it's my fault.
Well, just because someone apologizes doesn't mean they weren't abusive.
I'm just talking about the factors on the deal.
Right.
And whether or not if somebody under my hypothetical admits to responsibility for the accused abuse and apologizes for that, whether or not we would consider that denying and blaming.
I would need more information on the relationship in this scenario to decide that.
Is there a scenario? Okay. How about using emotional abuse? If there's no accusations of any name calling or telling her what to wear, this hypothetical victim, in fact, she's comfortable enough to wear a sports bra and short around him. There's no displaying weapons. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. No evidence in their relationship of playing mind games or humiliating her or making her feel bad about herself. Would you agree with me that that might not be a factor?
Well, you gave me a discrete list, but emotional abuse also includes name calling,
Okay.
putting someone down, affecting them emotionally.
I guess, is there a scenario, Mr. Ferris, where you will agree with me that a relationship might not include emotional? Because I don't know how to give you enough factors for you to say, no, it may not.
Yeah, I can't help you with that. I'm not asking the questions.
Oh, I was asking you one. If there was
I
a
know,
scenario.
I'm not, you are.
Would you take into account, based on, with these factors such as emotional abuse, economic abuse, male privilege, using children, all of these, if the alleged victim, or let me give you a scenario, she does not live with him, she's actually in another relationship, potentially engaged.
Okay.
She tells him she does not want to be with him.
Okay.
And she plans to move away without. Would those be those factors that you would have taken out when deciding if that relationship?
Well, that would be factors of the relationship, but I haven't heard you say anything about what their history is, what trauma she's experienced what's going on with children in their lives, all sorts of other dimensions of their relationship.
I guess, so is there no scenario where there can be abuse in a relationship and then there no longer is abuse, where they are no longer in this wheel? Because the way you're answering your questions, that's the impression I'm getting.
So I have come across situations where there's an emotional abuse or a physical abuse, but it's not a pattern or behavior. It doesn't go on over a period of time in an attempt to control someone. So if someone pushes down their girlfriend on a night out and he gets arrested for domestic violence because they live together, it's a battery, that's domestic violence, but that's it. She's not appeasing, she's not put an emotion, the whole power and control dynamic isn't happening. That is domestic violence under criminal law, but it isn't domestic violence in the sense of a pattern or behavior to try to get the appeasement or this sort of consensus out of a victim where they're afraid to poke the bear, all the things I've already talked about. So if that answers your question.
It didn't. Is it your testimony that once a relationship has power and control aspect, that is forever, even if there's no continued allegations of abuse for years, no continued allegations of abuse, no continued allegations of emotional abuse, never any allegations of sexual abuse? The parties are living apart. They're independently, I keep saying independently wealthy, that's not what I mean. Independent, economically independent. They are, the female is telling him she doesn't want to be with him and has moved on to a new relationship. Is there no scenario, in your opinion, where people can get off this power and control wheel, even if they were on it at some point in their relationship?
I think it's possible, but it's not likely, and it's not the typical thing that I see. Usually there's still a dynamic of emotional abuse.
So even under my facts,
yes,
with no allegations of
yes,
emotional abuse here,
no,
it's your opinion that not good enough, they're still on this power and control wheel?
Well, I can speak from my critical learning and studying this, and also my practice, and I have custody issue couples where they're domestic violence, and 10 years later there's still abuse taking place, even though they're remarried and don't live together. So by example, I see continued abuse. Could there be a couple that don't? I'll say it's possible.
Thank you.
Redirect.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Can this witness be released?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, you are released from your subpoena. You're free to go.
Thank you for all your help.
All right, Mr. Taylor, call your next witness.
Gina Torsha, Your Honor.
Judge, I think we're going to have to approach.
Defense calls Gina Torsha.
Actually, as she's sitting down, attorneys come back one more time. Hello, ma'am.
Good morning, Your Honor. How are you?
Good. Go ahead and have a seat. My name is Judge White. I'm presiding over this case. Just make yourself comfortable in that chair. You want to be about 12 to 15 inches from that microphone. You can adjust it up, down, left, right, however you need. And if you just speak in a loud, clear voice, we should hear you just fine.
Yes, Your Honor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Could you tell us your full name, spell your last name, please?
Gina Torsha, Torchia.
Torsha, did you at one time work for an attorney by the name of Stephen?
Yes, sir.
Back in June of 2008, you have been employed on this murder case.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall exchanging an email with Detective Gillum on June 5th, 2008?
Yes, sir.
Did you have an opportunity to review it?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to pass to you, Ms. Torsha, what I want, defendant's exhibit number 25, and ask you to identify it.
Yes, sir.
What is it?
It's an email from Detective Gillum.
And does it include a response from you, or is it a response to her initial email to him?
It's a response from my initial email to him.
Okay, and is it a true and accurate copy of your email to him and Detective Gillum's response?
Yes, sir.
Move to introduce it into evidence at this point, Your Honor. Defense at 25.
Same objection? Overruled.
All right,
Defendant Exhibit 25 will be received.
Ms. Torsha, you on this day sent Detective Gillum a copy of South Carolina domestic violence restraint?
No, because we were not aware of one.
Okay. Does he send you a copy of it?
He does send me a copy of the order, but there was never an order entered into the Charleston County Clerk's or the Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
So we had no proof of an order at the time.
Would you please read for us, Ms. Torsha, Detective Gillum's response to you on Tuesday, June 5th, 2018,
Gina,
6:19 p.m.
I noticed something that you both need to be aware of, unless there's something I'm missing. If you read that section just before the judge's signature, it states the order will be in place 6 months of the day of the hearing, which was May.
Slow down a little bit.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm a fast reader. Sorry about
Slow down a
that.
little bit for us.
Evelyn Woods.
Where do you want me? Okay. Which was May November 3rd.
Ms. Torsha.
Yes.
I'll start over.
Yes, sir. Gina, I noticed something that you both need to be aware of, unless there's something I am missing. If you read that section just before the judge's signature, signature, it states the order will be placed for 6 months of the day of the hearing, which was May, November 3rd, not November 27th, and sets it to expire May 3rd, which would be 6 months from November 3rd. Again, it's not something I would have made a physical arrest on, but the SAO will at some point make a filing decision. If I am reading something wrong here, let me know.
Okay, we can agree that SAO be state attorney.
Yes, sir.
So lastly, Torsia, this is Detective Gillum telling you that order was in effect, stay away order,
Objection.
as of November 3rd, 2007, correct?
Sustained.
This is Detective Gillum explaining to
Objection,
Torsia, ask what I warrant.
More continuing coverage is on the way. The Black Swan murder trial of Ashley Benefield from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. Press subscribe now.